Well, the value of the wildlife is its own intrinsic value in that but it's also as part of the whole ecology of the site. No place on the planet is complete without its sort of full range of species. It's evolved, the range of species for that site have evolved over millennia into an ecology, an ecosystem of that site. But the site supports it, but the site also needs it in terms to function effectively. If we diminish that wildlife by clearing habitat, and I mean wildlife, I include plants as well. If we diminish it, clearing it by excess degradation and too much disturbance, well, then the site is poorer, and then turning sort of to our human needs, it then is less productive of the things that we need out of it. And I think a lot of Permies realise this, and they try their best to incorporate wildlife. But the reason I think Helen and I wrote the book, or that Helen had the book in her and that I agreed to collaborate, was that I could see that invertebrates are a very important part of wildlife that are often not acknowledged or overlooked in this whole scheme. They're by far the biggest number of species and the biggest amount of living biomass on any site, when you include all the ones that fly around and the ones that burrow in the soil and even swim in the water. And of course, they're, in terms of food chains or food webs, they're a very important part in that, and they're often the mediators. They're the ones that translate the food and the energy from the plants. They're the ones that eat the plants, or crabs eat seaweed and so on in water, and other animals eat the insects, the invertebrates, and gain their nutrition that way. So that if we don't have that great mass of invertebrate life in the soil and eating the leaves and crawling all over the plants, then we don't get that transmission of energy around the food web, or in the old style of thinking, up the food chain to the carnivorous animals and the mammals and the marsupials and so on. So I suppose, coming to the final part of your question about how you can include that in permaculture design, one of the main lessons for me when I really considered this was realising that I, and I think many other permaculture designers, had this idea of, you have your intensive veggies in zone 1 and your fruit trees in zone 2, and it's not till zone 4 or 5 that you really have your sort of native plants that provide the habitat for your native insects and other invertebrates. Sure, we'll improve soil in zone 1 and zone 2, and that does involve providing a lot more habitat for your native slaters and worms and millipedes and all those sorts of things that provide that recycling and decomposing role in the soil. But what we're experimenting with, both at Northey Street and in the book and various other, and Helen's been doing it, my co-author, in her place, is mixing and matching native plants with exotic food plants much more than traditionally in a permaculture designs, and also highlighting the role of native foods or bush foods, and encouraging people to grow more of them. I don't think 25 million Australians settled in cities and even in rural properties will ever be able to feed themselves totally on bush food plants, because we're no longer hunter-gatherers, or predominantly hunter-gatherers such as the Aboriginal people were, with a much lower population rate. But there are many bush foods that we could be eating more, and the thing we highlight in the book is that those bush foods support or provide food for many, many, many more native insects and other invertebrates than our exotic food plants. Now, some exotic food plants do support native insects, and no doubt about that, but nowhere near the rate that the native plants will do. And even with the exotic food plants, we can still incorporate a lot of native plants in amongst our orchards and forest gardens and food forests and so on, to play their role in enriching the soil and in attracting in or providing food for the native invertebrates, many of which are often pollinators, They're herbivores that recycle the leaves and flowers and fruit, excess fruit from our plants into the soil, and therefore keep that cycling of nutrients happening. And so that's what we're experimenting with and finding good results with by incorporating those native plants. And to even give you an example, I mean, a lot of permaculture people will plant good bug mix to bring in particularly predatory wasps that will then predate on caterpillars that might be eating our tomatoes or our corn or whatever. But the good bug mix is exotic plants by and large. And we're saying that you can provide a much better effect, similar to what we're trying to achieve with a good mix of plants, like Queen Anne's Lace and umbelliferae and things like that. You can provide that through planting native plants and get a much bigger effect and more support for your whole ecosystem. We're hoping to be able to demonstrate on the ground that it really does work.
Thank you.